This is the Bob Davis Podcast YouTube channel. This is the channel where I talk about my audio podcast, which I post at thebobdavispodcast.com and Spotify. We are live at Joshua Tree National Park. You can kind of tell from the different scenes in the background. Normally I would not do a video with so much sun in my face, but I don't care because I think in a way the sun is really kind of one of the key messages of Joshua Tree. You come here in November, October, probably even December, and you get this beautiful sun, and it's about 75. At night it will be in the 40s, maybe even lower 40s. But it's just a tremendous experience to be in this peaceful, beautiful place. I'm actually talking fairly softly because you can hear people all over this park. It's very acoustically, in a way, kind of live, and you can hear people coughing and people talking and so forth. I'm some ways away from the campground so that I can kind of do this without feeling super self-conscious. But yeah, Joshua Tree, California. You know, somebody said to me the other day that they had a friend that did videos where they did travel tips and talked about the national parks. You won't have any travel tips in this video because I kind of don't believe in it. Certainly there's things I can tell you, but I don't consider myself an expert on the national parks. I don't have a big bucket list to be in the national parks, but I find myself gravitating toward the national parks, and that's what I talk about. I talk about the changes we go through in nomad life. And recently, I've devoted quite a bit of time to talking about how I wintered in Quartzsite, I think the last 3 years. And basically decided at the beginning of my 5th year of nomad travel that I wasn't going to do that anymore. And that I was going to just sort of head out. And I talked in the podcast, the reason originally for staying in one place, and that happened to be Quartzsite, was because we had that inflation, which at one point was something like 9.5%, and fuel costs were very high. So I didn't want to expose myself to inflation, so I just stayed in one place for most of the winter. So I'd be there from September till February, sometimes March. And I did have to leave a couple of different times because of family emergencies, but I always came back. So living and, sort of being on Bureau of Land Management land, long-term visitor areas, or dispersed camping areas can be a little stressful for a lot of reasons, which I've outlined in previous podcasts, and I don't have a need to sort of beat that dead horse, especially in Quartzsite. So that's one of the reasons that I've become partial to national parks. I don't have a bucket list. A lot of people have a bucket list of they want to go to all the national parks before the end. And I really don't. I don't have a bucket list to be in any particular national park. I have my favorites. This is one of my favorites. Joshua Tree has a vibe, and it's usually not real crowded. People are quiet. It makes, the things that you're seeing here have a way of sort of making a person quiet. They quiet us. And I find that to be just fantastic. I'm in a first come, first served site. There's a few of them, and I don't do travel tips. So basically, I kind of just give you my internal observations. And I also don't do travel tips because I think, especially for people who are quote unquote experts on the national parks, I think it's because I believe that travel should unfold for us, and it shouldn't be something that we have to study. It shouldn't be something that we try to watch every piece of media we can find on a particular subject. Oh, I'm going to Lassen. I want to know all the details about Lassen. One of the things in the podcast I talked about was I've been through here many times and not camped. Let's just say many, probably 4 or 5. At least. And most recently, I've been up on the dry lake bed in Joshua Tree, which is BLM, and it's been great. It's been free, and it's kind of wild. It's dramatic. And if you've seen stuff on Instagram or YouTube Shorts, you've seen the dust storms that often occur. And so it's a dramatic, extreme place to hang out, and I've really enjoyed it. This is a completely different experience. There's a little bit of wind, but it's not real bad that I can't record outside. And quite honestly, even if the wind was pretty bad, I would still record outside, because this place you kind of have to see. You kind of have to be outside if you're going to do a video about Joshua Tree. I'm not in the business of making videos about the national parks. They don't particularly like that. So this is just, not far from my campsite at White Tank here, which is a first come, first served site. And there's a few of them. Now, I mentioned driving through here a couple of times. Why? Because you kind of get the lay of the land. You drive through a couple times, you kind of see what's what, and then you can figure out where you want to stay. So last night I had gone down to Coachella, because there's a great Indian reservation casino down there that has a fuel station with fuel for $3.89 or $3.99 diesel too, or $3.79 depending on the price of oil. And they don't have California tax, and they don't have federal tax, so it's great to go get fuel there. They also have a nice restaurant, and then I take a shower at one of the other truck stops, because they haven't put the showers in yet at this Indian casino place that I went to. So I came back on the 10, and then when I got up here, the closest campground to get into is Cottonwood, which is on the south end of Joshua Tree. So I made reservations on recreation.gov, got my site, and I'm not sure if I stayed there 1 or 2 days. I guess I stayed 1 day. And then I was looking at the little map they give you, and I noticed that there are so-called first-come, first-serve sites. Now, if you come here and you go look at the information on the little kiosk that they have set up, then you'll see that they actually mention the first-come, first-serve sites. These are usually smaller campgrounds where there's not a lot of room. There's 3 of them, Hidden Valley, Bell, and this one. This is probably the biggest one, although I haven't been to Hidden Valley. But it's best to be already here and get out of your camp before checkout time, which is noon, so you can come up to one of these first-serve, first-come sites, and you will be able to get a place. And then you can stay here as long as you want. There's some funky stuff with paying. They took the kiosk out, the pay kiosk out, and the rangers come and you can pay them, but sometimes that doesn't work. So they'll suggest that you drive 20 miles north to the northern exit by 29 Palms and pay there, which I'm not going to drive up there and drive back. So luckily, the Ranger Jessica, she was great. She came and took care of the 2-day fee, which for me isn't very much. If you have purchased one of those little cards, America the Beautiful cards is what I call them, but there are various discounts for retirees, for veterans, and you can also buy discounts in advance, monthly, or however it works. I don't know. I didn't buy one of those. But you really get a great deal on staying in a national park when you do that. So after staying in so many BLMs, I'm just going to say that my feeling is that BLM is not a real good steward of the land. They're supposed to do that. There's a lot of Bureau of Land Management sites out west. Most of them are in Nevada, but there's many in Arizona and California as well. Although not so many in far western California. You get close to Los Angeles and San Diego, you get into state parks, which are very expensive. But BLMs are scrubby and sometimes dirty, and people who stay at the BLM for any length of time kind of homestead. Even at the dry lake bed, there's a little section that's not the dry lake bed, and there are people there that let their garbage just pile up, kind of like at Slab City. And I just don't understand that. You'll get this in BLM. You never get this in the national park. In fact, a piece of loose garbage or trash of any kind is almost impossible to find in a national park. You're not allowed to pick up scrub. You're not allowed to disturb any of the flora and the fauna. So you have to bring in your own firewood and if you do find garbage, most people pick it up and throw it away properly. So never find trash out here at all. It is very well maintained and very well taken care of. So conversely, BLM is very, I mean, I've seen truck stops that are cleaner than some BLM sites. And there's a lot of controversy right now about the BLMs, as you've seen if you've been watching videos that I've done from Quartzsite, which I won't do again. Because there's nothing more to say. There are states suing the BLM, which really is about mineral rights more than anything else. But one of the things that's been said in these suits is that BLM is not a real good steward of the land, which they are supposed to be. You know, when they started the BLM, they repealed the Homestead Act. And the Homestead Act allowed you to go on federal land and homestead it. I think. I don't know the details. I just know the history because much of the West was settled under various renditions of the Homestead Act, called different things over the years. But you could get, 300 or 400 acres if you could stay there and improve it and satisfy the requirements of whatever piece of legislation was active at the time. The latest, of course, is the Homestead Act. And they repealed that in 1976, and they replaced it with the Bureau of Land Management, which was supposed to make sure that mineral rights and grazing rights and so forth were taken care of properly, and that the land was managed properly. So that's one of the things that's going on. Certain people have called the BLM the Bureau of Grazing and Minerals, which that seems to be their main interest. And the lawsuit has been brought by Utah, and then I think 6 or 7 western states have filed amicus briefs, friend of the court briefs, to jump onto the suit. And basically it alleges that the Bureau of Land Management hasn't really, in order to actually, they claim, have the land under their control, it has to be named for a purpose. And the BLM is notoriously bad at management, so they haven't named a number of these tracts. And the states say that it really ought to be then ceded to the states. Of course, the problem with that is really it's about mineral rights. The states want to control the mineral rights because they want the revenue. And I think that's what it's all about. We'll see what the courts do. This is a Supreme Court lawsuit, so a lot of people are talking about it. But there's other issues with the BLM too. And I don't want to make the whole video about that, and because I always get lots of comments about it. And honestly, I don't want to argue about the BLM. I just, everybody's got an opinion. But the national parks aren't that way. So one of the things that I will be doing now that I'm kind of free of staying in one place because the fuel prices have come down, and I think they will stay down for a while, is I'm going to do some more touring and go to some places that I love. Of course, I love Grand Canyon, too cold up there right now, and I love Lassen and Moab and all those places, but that's also too cold. So we're going to stay in the Southwest for a period of time, and I may come back to Joshua Tree, and I may go to some of these other national parks down here. Another one of my favorites is Death Valley. And I don't know what your favorites are, but again, I don't have a bucket list. I don't have a little list that I'm ticking off of all the national parks that I've been. Occasionally you'll see an RV that has the national park stickers perfectly arranged on the back of the RV to let everybody know that they've been to 50 or 10 or 30 of the national parks. I don't even know how many there are. But I like to discover them. I like to discover them on my own. I don't really even want to know anything about certain parks. Dinosaur National Monument is certainly a national park, but it's a monument. And I went there because I wanted to go down to Echo Park, which is supposedly, it is fantastic, but you go way down and then you can't get out if you aren't in a certain kind of vehicle. So I had quite a ordeal with that, and there's just a podcast about that ordeal of making my way out. Again, I suppose if I'd done some research, I would know that that's not necessarily the place to go, right? But part of the fun of travel, part of the experience of being a nomad is literally the experience. It's finding out these things. It's seeing these things for yourself. So if you want to hear the Joshua Tree podcast, I'll put a link in the description box below. I do like it over here. I do like the dry lake bed, and I like it a lot at Joshua Tree because it's so quiet and peaceful. And the other thing is, they will tell you this, so I don't feel like this is a travel tip. So this park is basically a park because it sort of hosts a very interesting natural thing, and that is the confluence of the Mojave and the Colorado Desert. So when you go through the transition areas, you'll see Joshua trees, which you can't really see them because they're back there, but you can't really see them in the video, and various other types of flora and fauna. But then when you go further south and you get into the Colorado Desert, then it's a completely different experience. Then up here, which is a little bit higher desert, this is the Mojave, and the rock formations, the geography, and the terrain, and the plants, and even the animals are different in the Mojave area versus the Colorado area. And the Joshua trees are primarily up north of here, closer to Joshua Tree, California, the town. And you don't see, there's a few of them here because we're kind of in this transition area. So that's kind of a cool thing. You don't see that too often. And then there's quite a history with this place that didn't become a national park until the 1930s under Roosevelt, because what was happening is people were doing ridiculous things out here, like lighting Joshua trees on fire to guide cars through this area. And there was obviously a lot of mining. And of course, there are many native peoples here over the eons, because it's a special kind of area. And when they made it a park, I think that was a good move because we can all enjoy it as it was. And, I'm not really an environmentalist. I understand the reason for national parks, but I guess the way that I learned it was when I went out east and I went up the Outer Banks. And a lot of the Outer Banks are national seashores. And the places that aren't, Myrtle Beach and some of these other towns, whatever the town where Kitty Hawk flew first, the developers have taken it over and you can't even see the ocean. And if it weren't for the national seashores along that area, you wouldn't have any idea what those islands were like, what those Outer Banks were like back in the day. Ocracoke Island is pretty original, but almost everywhere else they've built high-rise, spring break type hotels. And I realized that if it weren't for the national parks, and to a degree the state parks, there would be no preservation of those places out there. So despite the difficulties with Bureau of Land Management, it does provide a certain level of purpose, which is to prevent these lands from being developed in one way or another. And of course, that won't happen at all on the national park, in the confines of national parks. Some people think that there's too many national parks, and some people think there's too much federal land out west, and there shouldn't be, aside from the military stuff. But when you get into one of these places and you really see it, and you see how it's been fairly well preserved, and you experience... I gotta have some water, sorry. And you experience what it's like, well, it's worth it. That's what I think. It's worth it. So that's really about it. You have to listen to the podcast because I got into some of this stuff a little bit more in depth. Thanks for watching the videos. Thanks for sharing the videos. Thanks for liking the videos. Thanks for subscribing to the Bob Davis Podcast YouTube channel. And I really appreciate the people that have clicked through and listened to audio podcasts. The feeds are up, so that makes me feel pretty good. And, of course, there'll be more videos here at the Bob Davis Podcast video channel on YouTube. So that is all. So live from Joshua Tree.